This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome to the Elevate Construction Podcast, where we liken construction to concepts of war. My name is Jason Schroeder, and today's podcast is How to Lead Like General Patton. And this will be part 1, and tomorrow will be How to Lead Like General Patton part 2. This is episode 1 of the first war series. So why would you want to listen today? Do you want some strategies and tactics that will help you on your project site? Do you want to lead like the military generals of old? Do you want to learn from the lessons of history any good concept that can apply to today, to your problems, to your struggles, to your project site? Well, if any of these things sound interesting to you, then you'll want to listen today. But before I go on to the next section, let me talk about the war series. So I have realized that there are books, war books specifically, that really apply to the role of a superintendent, to a PM, to master builders on the construction site. A few of these are the 33 Strategies of War, The Art of War, military biographies for people like George Washington, General Eisenhower, and General Patton. And I feel like these books can greatly improve our operational excellence in everything that we do on a project site because of two reasons. Number one, they are time-tested and true principles. Number two, most of these concepts are what lean and integrated techniques and other current trends in the construction industry are branding as new things in our construction industry, but they really have been done for a long time. They may have been brought forth 80 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago. They're key concepts that can help us in every aspect of our work. So this war series will distill down some of my favorite concepts from war books that apply to construction. I also hope that they're interesting. I will do my best to retell stories that I feel are interesting and that will hopefully engage you, the listener, so that you can go have more excellence and operational awesomeness on your project site by learning from some of these great men and women of history. So let me give you a couple of quotes that have been attributed to General Patton. And then on the How to Lead Like General Patton part 2 for tomorrow, I'll save the other 4 or 5 quotes. So let me give you a couple of them. A pint of sweat will save a gallon of blood. And I really like this quote because it really talks to the value and virtue of pre-planning. So what General Patton was talking about is that sweat, planning, preparation, training, anything that you can do to get ahead of the battle will save a gallon of blood, meaning misfortunes, fatalities, casualties, delays, anything like that. That's the same thing with us in construction, that a pint of sweat, meaning a pint or a day of pre-planning, will save a week of field work in the field. An hour of pre-planning will save a day in the field. And that quote very much applies to us in construction. Let me give you the second quote. A good plan, violently executed now, is better than a perfect plan next week. I've always believed this and felt like this applies to us in construction. We cannot wait to perfect non-essential parts of a perfect plan before we roll something out. Rapidity and urgency and expediency are all virtues when it comes to construction, just like it is in war. So we need to make sure that we need to have a good plan, a collaborative plan, a plan that is bought into by the integrated team, and that we need to violently execute that in the field so that we can get ahead of additional delays and waste. Another quote attributed to General Patton is, lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. I would modify that to say, lead me, follow me, collaborate with me, or get out of my way. And some people insert another word in that quote. But I like that because in construction, when we are acting as field commanders and implementing the plan that the integrated team has decided upon, that your project team has decided upon, we need to have opportunities in the field where we are led, where we are leading, where we are collaborating. But if somebody does not want to get on board with that plan that that integrated team decided on, then they need to get out of the way and make sure that they figure out what their plan is, because on this project site, the rules are that we are clean, we are safe, we are organized, we are 100% disciplined, and we follow the plan that the team decided on. We don't go rogue and we don't go do things outside of those parameters for job site excellence and control. So I really like that quote: lead me, follow me, collaborate with me, or get out of my way. Another one: do everything you ask of those you command. I think this is so important because we have superintendents that come to work without their shirts tucked in, with their shoes untied, their truck and desk is messy, and everything that they do is disorganized and awry. And then they go out on the project site and ask trade partners to keep things clean. Or they try and teach a field engineer to go do double checks, but they don't do double checks themselves. Or. Anytime a leader, a PM, a superintendent, somebody on the project site that commands, that asks, that dictates that somebody else do something, and they are not modeling that behavior, that is a recipe for disaster. Here's another one: say what you mean and mean what you say. That level of transparency would be amazing if we in construction would espouse that concept. Here's the last one for today. Many soldiers are led to faulty ideas of war by knowing too much about too little. Now, I think this one is pertinent because right now we're in the final stages of writing a book called Elevating Construction Superintendents. One of the main things that is front and center of my mind right now while writing that, while doing superintendent boot camps and other things, is that a superintendent specifically, and actually let's circle in the PM into that too, can head down a really weird and wrong road if they don't get the right education or the right experiences. I mean, really weird concepts. And a superintendent will be best benefited if they learn proper principles and techniques from the start, proper habits from the start, and to really use that as a building point, as a building block for the rest of their career, right? So we have superintendents out there that will say, build 2 schedules, or that will change the schedule every month, or that will say, drive, and put workers in any open area. And a slew of hundreds of other just weird and ridiculous concepts. And you don't get a superintendent that starts saying things like, let's make sure that we have a flow in construction. Let's make sure that we have one transparent schedule for the owner. Let's make sure that we are safe as our first priority. You don't get superintendents that have really good foundational principles that where everything that they say, you're like, yep, I agree with what they just said. You don't get superintendents like that unless they've built their careers on proper principles. And so that quote, many soldiers are led to faulty ideas of war by knowing too much about too little. I would say many superintendents are led to faulty ideas about construction by knowing too much about too little and not knowing the right things. So let me tell you a couple of stories to introduce this podcast and the podcast for tomorrow. So there was the time as a lead superintendent where I noticed that the project, and there were about 280 workers on the project at the time, was really out of control that day. The pace wasn't healthy. Something felt wrong. You could see people doing treasure hunts, and it just felt unsafe. There were unclean areas. There were people moving past unquality work, and it just felt like there was a lot of chaos. Now, what I normally would do in that situation, or normally would have done, would be to hesitate and not go do the right thing. But I had read books like The 33 Strategies of War, and I had read books about Patton, a biography specifically, and I had seen the movie Patton, and I thought to myself, it is time for me to be the kind of field leader that I need to be. So I asked all of the people on the project management team to go collect everyone off of the project site into a huddle location, and we did a stand down and talked about the pace and energy of the project, asked everybody told them they needed to go clean up their areas, circle back for pre-task plans, and get quality expectations in line better than they had. And the people didn't like it. The foremen were like, you're wasting our time, don't do this. And even the project team was very hesitant about doing this. But I had made a decision that things were out of control, and I was trusted by the project team as an integrated team to go keep the project safe. That was my delegated responsibility. That was my role. And so I made a decision like a field commander would, brought everybody down, got them regrouped, and the rest of the day was run remarkably. And there isn't any amazing story or consequence or feedback that I got from that other than to tell you that most people are afraid to make decisions like that. Most people will yield to peer pressure. Most people will do what is popular. And we have to get that out of our heads, model from people like General Patton, and go shut down that project when it comes time. I remember a time when a very respected field director was working with another project director, and that project director told me a story about this, and I'll do my best in relaying it, but it really just gave me an impression of what real field commanders do. There was a time when they were hoisting culvert into an excavation on a project out on the sight lines, and the rigging wasn't up to par. The crews didn't know the weights of what they were lifting, and the forklift was overextended. And this field director walked up, looked at the situation, and said, "We're going to shut this whole thing down. This does not look safe." And the project director remembered, hey, we were on a schedule crunch. We needed to get this installed. We needed to get it installed before a storm was coming. There was a sense of urgency, and I wanted to keep going. But he shut the operation down, did the right thing, and it turns out we did not have enough planning done to make sure that we had the right position for the forklift, the right rigging. We didn't have everything staged properly to do this properly, and we hadn't fully planned out the work. And I am grateful that he shut down that work when I was hesitant to, because my mind was so focused on keeping schedule. And that's what that project director told me. I was very proud to hear that story, and that's what I imagine is what true builders, true leaders do in this industry. So let me tell you another story, and I'm going to read this one. This is from Bill O'Reilly's book, Killing Patton, and it's included here as a quote, as an excerpt, and it's called Advancing Against Hitler. In December 1944, the German army, under the command of German Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, launched a last-ditch offensive across Belgium, Luxembourg, and northeastern France. On December 16, 1944, it massed 29 divisions totaling 250,000 men at a weak point in the Allied lines, and during the early stages of the ensuing Battle of the Bulge, made significant headway towards the Meuse River. During the worst winter Europe had seen in years, Eisenhower called a meeting of all senior Allied commanders on the Western Front to a headquarters near Verdun on the morning of December 19th to plan strategy and a response to German assaults. At the time, Patton's Third Army was engaged in heavy fighting near Saarbrücken. Guessing the intent of the Allied command meeting, Patton ordered his staff to make 3 separate operational contingency orders to disengage elements of the Third Army from its present position and begin offensive operations towards several objectives in the area of the Bulge occupied by German forces. At the Supreme Command Conference, Eisenhower led the meeting, which was attended by Patton, Bradley, General Jacob de Vries, Major General Kenneth Strong, Deputy Supreme Commander Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder, and several staff officers. When Eisenhower asked Patton how long it would take him to disengage 6 divisions of his Third Army and commence a counterattack north to relieve the U.S. 101st Airborne Division, which had been trapped at Bastogne, Patton replied, "As soon as you're through with me." Patton then clarified that he had already worked up an operational order for a counterattack by 3 full divisions on September 21st, then only 48 hours away. Eisenhower was incredulous. "Don't be facetious, George. If you try to go that early, you won't have all 3 divisions ready and you'll go piecemeal." Patton replied that his staff already had a contingency operations order ready to go. Still unconvinced, Eisenhower ordered Patton to attack the morning of December 22nd using at least 3 divisions. Patton left the conference room, phoned his command, and uttered 2 words, "Play ball." This code phrase initiated a prearranged operational order with Patton's staff, mobilizing 3 divisions: the 4th Armored Division, the U.S. 80th Infantry Division, and the U.S. 26th Infantry Division from the Third Army, and moving them towards Bastogne. In all, Patton would reposition 6 full divisions, U.S. 3rd Corps and U.S. 12th Corps, from their positions on the Saar River from along the line stretching from Bastogne to Diekirch to Echternach. Within a few days, more than 133,000 Third Army vehicles were rerouted into an offensive that covered an average distance of over 11 miles per vehicle, followed by support echelons carrying 62,000 tons of supplies. Did Patton allow waiting to aid the enemy? No. He predicted the future, he guessed right, he assessed the situation, and advanced to victory. And so I hope that this little story is indicative of how he thought. And I personally feel like that one single story is one of the best stories that relate to how we should do planning in construction, how we should lead our forces in construction. We should be field generals. We are not victims behind the eight balls. I get a little bit grumpy and tired of superintendents that are always fighting fires and behind the eight ball and not knowing what they're doing. And instead of being annoyed with them, I've decided to throw out proper education, not from me, but the lessons of history to help people, because we are not reactionary. We are not reactive. We do not play behind the eight ball. We are not, behind the times. We are not victim to circumstance. We are not any of these things that put us behind active leadership. We are out in the front, leading the military, leading our project site, leading our workers, and doing those things which would allow us to predict the future, guess right, assess the situation, and advance to victory. So there are some principles about Patton that I'm really excited about and want to share with you. And here are my insights about Patton. So first of all, the movie Patton isn't that far off from the things that I personally read in his biography and in some of the other research that I've done. It might be a little bit embellished in the sense that it's more grandiose than maybe it was in the actual occurrence at the time, and it might not focus on as many of the problems as maybe there were, but the movie Patton is absolutely amazing, and I would recommend any field commander, any superintendent, any field engineer, any project manager, watch that movie, try and get the passion, get a sense for how your leadership can improve, and also look at some of the things that he didn't do right. But at the end of the day, Patton really believed what he taught, believed what he said, and tried to become this designed figure in history that was able to lead armies to victory and really do amazing things. And I don't think that anyone would doubt that Patton was instrumental in winning World War II for the Allies, for the Allied forces. He was absolutely amazing with the 7th Army and with the 3rd Army, and I just absolutely love watching that movie. So my insights to Patton are that, first of all, we must act and believe in the part. A superintendent that doesn't come and believe in this vision of what a field commander can be or should be or would be really is probably doing themselves a disservice and not leveraging the full look and feel of what it takes to be a leader in the field, right? We have supers that come in, they're not dressed very well. They don't look very well. They don't talk very well. They don't know how to use computers, and some of them are like, I like the old time way of doing construction. Well, what do you mean the old time way of doing construction? The old time way of doing construction is the way they built the Empire State Building and some of the concepts that these master builders have, leveraged over the years, and some of the concepts from war generals from like World War II, from Eisenhower and Patton. This is the old-timey way of doing construction, and the concepts and principles are based around flow, around evenness, around lower inventory rates, around acting properly, around keeping the energy of the army around your workers high, around organization huddles and things like that. And I think that there's this brand of superintendents that's this unqualified, no technology, no finesse, no people skills type person, which thinks they're in line with the old school when really the old school is the right way to do things and does not espouse any concept whatsoever of being sloppy, of not being prepared, of not planning, of not communicating, of not using technology, right? So Patton one time said, the leader must be an actor and have a fixed determination to acquire the warrior spirit, and is unconvincing unless he lived his part. And in his biography, you will read, if you ever take that opportunity, a person that literally designed every aspect of his life, every aspect of his look, designed his family, designed his experience, his education, all of his opportunities, and really led a life so that one day he could lead a bunch of men into a hopeless battle. And in fact, in the movie Patton, he's looking in a mirror in one scene and he says, I've waited all my life to lead a bunch of men into a hopeless battle. And that really is General Patton. To understand him is to understand that everything that he did was designed. Even when he took the rank of 3-star general before it was approved by Congress, that was to show a certain amount of authority so that he could accomplish the thing that he needed to do in battle. And there was probably some vanity in there as well. But in order to understand Patton, you have to understand that quote, that the leader must be an actor and have a fixed determination to acquire the warrior spirit, and he is unconvincing unless he lived his part. So as we're going through this podcast today and tomorrow, and you're listening to a couple of the concepts that I'm presenting, obviously is my opinion, but from research done on General Patton, what I'm hoping is that you'll like the podcast, number one. Number two, that you enjoy the stories. And number three, that you can kind of grocery shop the concepts that you like. We're going to cover a lot of concepts, and I've debated between spending a lot of time on one or two or covering multiple concepts. In fact, at the end, that's why I re-recorded this podcast to have one today and one tomorrow on General Patton. And so I really want to encourage you to relate to one or two of these concepts and then apply them in your own personal leadership. So here are some principles that I believe about Patton. He believed he had to become what he envisioned himself to be. And he envisioned himself to be a master warrior like the warriors of old, like Alexander the Great, like Napoleon, like some of the greatest figures in history. He studied them, learned about their techniques, and brought all of those lessons from history forward. He believed he needed to look and train and act like a warrior. He needed to look the part. He designed his wardrobe. He designed his outfits. He would always keep his helmet on him. He always had 2 or 3 pistols on his person. He trained hard. He made sure that he was always available at the right opportunities. He made sure that he was fully in character 100% of the time. Also, everything he believed became how he acted in the field, either good or bad. And he did a lot of reading. If anybody really got down to the brass tacks of how many books and how much research he actually did on war, and I'm not talking about like books like we do it, like reading on Audible or listening to a podcast or whatever. I'm talking reading countless amounts of actual hardback books on the lessons learned from history and from war history. This man was as educated as they come on military tactics, and everything he believed became how he acted in the field, either good or bad. He was always, like I said, reading the lessons of history, and these shaped what he believed and how he thought. So today, I really want to cover some things that stood out to me in the movie. And so I remember this one part, and I always relate this to workers in the field when I'm doing a huddle and we're talking about safety. I remember a part when he arrived on the scene, the other commander had been relieved, and Eisenhower, through General Bradley, had ordered Patton into the fight after there were like over 18,000 casualties in Tunisia. General Patton was ordered in, and he started whipping everybody into shape. And he was talking to General Bradley, and he said, "You know why we lost in Tunisia? You know why our boys got whooped? It's because they don't look like soldiers, they don't act like soldiers, they don't train like soldiers." And so in the movie, and this is also substantiated in his biography, he started going through the barracks into the lunchrooms, and he instilled a certain level of discipline. He believed in saluting. He believed in dressing. He believed in getting up on time. He believed in morning drills. He believed in all of these forms of standard discipline, and he whipped them into shape to where they started acting like soldiers, training like soldiers, looking like soldiers, eating like soldiers, and having a schedule like soldiers. He practiced like he wanted to play, and everybody was on point. He turned those people into razors, and his men would fight for him so voraciously that the Germans were afraid of him and his army the most out of all of the Allied forces. And he was famous among Hitler's generals and Hitler himself. They feared Patton down to the core because his men were fighting machines. They were fanatics. They were razors because he had trained them to be. But here are some things that stood out to me as well. Patton cared about his men deeply. He really felt like if he could advance the attack, drive with a sense of urgency, and really increase the rapidity of the war and attack, and attack some more. That's another quote that Patton is famous for saying, attack and attack some more. Nothing was ever successfully defended. He felt like you could reduce casualties, and that was actually proven in the numbers, reduce casualties in war because you're always advancing on the enemy. He really cared about his men, and this came clear in the movie Patton, which is substantiated by some photos and from some documentaries where Patton would visit the sick and the injured and really have a level and sense of care for his men. He cared about them. He wanted them to go home safely, and he was very connected there. And I really appreciated that moment. Another moment from the movie, which I enjoyed, was a part where he removed roadblocks. And in construction, that's one of the main things that a project manager and a superintendent should do, is to remove roadblocks for the people, right? In this scene, they were held up. They were in Italy, and they were held up by two donkeys that were on a bridge and some carts. And this column of vehicles and war machines was being strafed by enemy aircraft. And he drove up personally in the field, leading from the front, out at the place where the action was happening. And he went up and said, "What in the heck is the matter with you guys? You're going to let a column get strafed because of a couple of donkeys?" And he took out his pistol, shot both of them, and had his men throw the donkeys over the edge. And he got the column going again over the bridge. And I've always remembered, now I'm not insensitive to the fact that people don't like that he shot the donkeys, but in war, when human lives are at stake, it was a pretty easy decision to make. And the point is on project sites, a lot of times our people are worried about luring the donkeys off the bridge with the owner in an acceptable way, while our people are getting strafed by enemy aircraft, when we need to just shoot the donkeys and move forward. And so fanatical roadblock removal is very much something that Patton espoused throughout his life and in all of this research done for him. Also, if you also watch the movie Patton, you will notice the introductory speech. Now, that speech comes from commands, from orders, from advice to other commanders, from other speeches. It's kind of a collection there, right? But he did motivate his men. He did make sure that he was very clear with his commanders, and he spoke in a way as to motivate his people. And I think that on the project sites, we can really do a better job of motivating, inspiring, and leading our people, leading the foreman, leading the superintendents on site, and leading our workers. One of Patton's standing field directives, one of the tactics that he always instructed his tank divisions, his infantry, and his leaders and his soldiers to do would be to always communicate to the end of the lines, communicate where the soldiers have been and where they are headed to the next day. And I thought that was amazing, because we on this podcast and in Elevate Construction encourage everyone to get the information all the way to the worker. It's a shame that sometimes the last planner system only gets it to the foreman, and then there's a major breakdown from foreman to workers. We have to get this communication all the way to workers, and that's definitely something that Patton did through his communication system. Also, no excuses. Patton did not take excuses. I remember in the movie a point where he said, "Why aren't we through that beachhead?" And the commander started to give him excuses, and he said, "You're fired." And he looked to the second in command and said, "What's your name?" And once he told him his name, he said, "You're now the senior commander. I want you through that beachhead or I'll fire you." And there was just this sense of urgency that was amazing. And he didn't take excuses. He wanted people to realize that they had more potential, more to give. They weren't giving 100%, and that the mind will give up 100 times before the body will, and that they could go and win the day and actually save human lives if they would just push with a sense of urgency. He also knew his enemy. He read books, and there was this one notable point in the movie where he says, "Rommel, you ... I read your book." And the book that Rommel had written was about tank warfare. And Patton had read that book and out-strategized him and won that battle. And it was fantastic. I've always remembered that point. Patton would read about his enemies. He would study the terrain. He would study their past moves. He would study what had happened there historically before. And he would very much lead from that point of view. He knew his enemy. And we in construction would do well if we would know our enemies. What's the biggest waste and variation on our project site? What is creating variation on our project site? What are the things that are going to kill us, that are going to make things unsafe? What are the downfalls and pitfalls of certain subcontractors on site that we need to be aware of? Patton was able to beat the enemy because he knew the enemy. And we in construction have to know the enemy by learning lean, by learning the 8 wastes, by 5S'ing, by bringing problems to the surface, by creating stable environments with flow that will allow us to fully understand what the enemy is, where it's attacking, and who they are. And he really defined that for him. So we, in our world in construction, we really need to make sure all workers understand the 8 wastes, that they understand lean concepts, that foremen understand lean concepts, and that they are motivated to go out in the field and attack safety and attack quality and do what they're supposed to be doing because they know that that building is trying to kill them. One of the things that I always say in morning huddles when I'm, giving a speech or something is I'm like, everything out there is trying to kill you. And if you don't look like a soldier, act like a soldier and train like a soldier. If you don't look like a worker, act like a worker and train like a worker, and you're not out there and you don't know the enemy, the things that are trying to produce an unquality product, the things that are trying to kill you on site, the things that are trying to derail you. And if we don't know that together as a team, we are going to get overrun and we're going to have problems. And so Patton not only knew his enemy, but he made sure everyone in the army knew who the enemy was, and he galvanized the team around defeating them. He also led from the front. I remember a point where Patton was calling over a river to one of his commanders, and he's like, "What are you guys waiting for?" And they said, "We're looking for a place to cross the river." And he's like, "I've already done that. It's 100 yards down the line. Let's get going and put on your helmet." And he was like, "Okay." And Patton basically was removing excuses and saying, here's how you do it. Here's how you accomplish this task. And we, in our roles on the construction site, can go out and lead field engineers and say, this is how you do a port check. Concrete foreman, this is how you go button up the walls like this and make sure that we have a successful placement. The MEP trades, walk them through the systems. This is why we need IDF rooms coming up on time. Have a certain amount of presence in the field. And I will say that Patton led from field command when needed. He would have maps, he would have planning strategies, he would have schedules, and he would make sure to do plenty of planning before he ever went to war, and then was able to go out and be in the field and lead from the front. And that's called the dilemma of command, but Patton really did well. It's kind of like when I tried learning how to drive and I took my first driving instructions and the instructor said, you always need to brake before the turn. You don't brake while you're turning because that eliminates or reduces the grip of your tires on the road. You need to brake beforehand while you're going in a straight line, and then you really want to accelerate through that turn so your tires will grip and make it more stable. That's the same thing. You want to plan before the turn, and then when you're in the turn, be out in the field leading your folks with a presence in the field. That's the solution to the dilemma of command, is you need to do your planning ahead of time and then have that done, plan A, B, C, D, and F before you get into battle and have to lead from the front. And he always did that and was a great example of that. Patton was always advancing, and he always trained his soldiers in an aggressive manner. And when training for tank drills, he worked the men hard, but every situation they came into, they knew how to react because they practiced like they played. He studied the terrain. He planned ahead of time. He knew what was going on, what the plan was, what plan A, B, C, D, and F was, and he made sure all of his other commanders knew exactly the same thing. He studied the terrain. He made the plans. He planned enough ahead of time. He knew what the enemy was going to do and attack. He knew the fundamentals of what the enemy was going to do and who they were, and he was disciplined in training to overcome and attack. A couple more. Patton led by instinct a lot. He didn't just look at his senses and logically look at what was going on. He would always feel that. He would know the context. He was well educated. He was well read. He would observe the battleground and make decisions based on his learning, based on the context, based on what he sensed and observed, and also based on how he felt. He was a very instinctive leader, field commander, and I think we need to do the same thing on our project sites and be instinctive builders in the field and be able to sense what's going on our project and lead like a field commander. Just a couple more. He was disciplined. He practiced how he wanted to play. He dressed the part. His dress and appearance was proud and prepared. He always modeled what he expected. He always had a plan. It was the art of war for him. He never sent troops into an impossible, aggressive situation before proper pre-planning. He always guarded against being too conservative. He was willing to take risks based on certain knowledge that he knew was reliable, and he attacked with the motto of a good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan next week. Like I already said, he loved his men, he was respected by them, and he knew that driving would reduce casualties, but he also kept a steady pace and a flow. Now, there are also some bad things that Patton did that we could learn from. Sometimes he would overpush his men, which caused battle fatigue. In war, that's a much different circumstance than what we're dealing with, but we need to make sure that the energy of our crews, that the speed of our workers is not going down and we're not going too fast. We need to make sure that our people on our project sites do not get battle fatigue. You all remember probably, and if you don't, I recommend you watch the movie. He slapped a soldier that had anxiety and was in the military medical facility there, and he was offended that he was there and that he wasn't out on the front lines, and so he slapped that soldier and threatened to shoot him, and he got into a lot of trouble for that. And we, as field commanders in construction, cannot slap a soldier. We cannot go offend people. We cannot have our integrity, our actions called into question by bad behavior. We need to not say offensive things. We need to make sure that we're always above the line and doing the right thing. And quite frankly, Patton did say some offensive things and got himself into trouble a lot of the time. The last thing that we can learn from Patton and not do what he did is he didn't apologize very well or at all. Field commanders in construction need to be vulnerable with their people and always apologize if they're wrong. There is no merit in the visual impression of being right all the time, at least in construction. We have to admit when we make mistakes and always plan, do, check, act, and set that example. And so those are some concepts. Tomorrow, just to signpost, there are some typical standing orders that Patton always gave to his armies. And we're going to go through those and talk about how they tie to construction and also cover a couple of other key things about Patton. But let me just close this out by saying our current condition is that supers show up messy. They don't dress the part. They don't act the part. They're unorganized. They don't know how to use computers. They don't understand technology. They don't know the terrain. They don't train their people. They don't care about people. And there are a number of other conditions which I'll talk about tomorrow. But again, this is not the old school. The old school is to be organized. It's to be disciplined. It's to make sure that we're safe. It's to use the best technology available. It's to make sure we train our people. It's to know the phasing and logistics on our projects. It's to know the schedule. It's to have that well communicated to all the people in the field, to care about our people. That's really the old school that comes from construction, that comes from war, that comes from military generals, from people like the folks that built the Empire State Building in a record amount of time. This is the school that we should be adhering ourselves to, and most of these concepts are what are reported to be or branded to be lean concepts today. So the solution is to start molding your personal style of leadership to people like Patton and to not let it develop by happenstance. Don't let your leadership happen by happenstance. Don't let it just occur. Intentionally design yourself to become who you want to be and that great leader that you want to be. So here's a quick challenge. Read one of Patton's biographies. Watch the movie Patton until it fires you up. Lead like him for his good parts and don't do the things that he didn't do well. And that's a challenge for you. I'm going to save my closing remarks for tomorrow, but I really hope that this has been helpful. And if you want any clarification, additional podcast topics, if you want to do an interview or have any questions for me, you can email me at jasons@elevateconstructionist.com or visit my website, www.elevateconstructionist.com. IST stands for Insights, Solutions, and Training. In the meantime, I really hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and on we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.